how strict did the Bristol connection have to be then?
Well, our Bristol
sounding from what you've got, that isn't necessarily.
Oh yeah, no, it is very much so, because I didn't tell you, key symbolic, key sort of symbol in the film is Concorde. Her father worked on Concorde, was one of the engineers of Concorde, and we have 2 days shooting at the Concorde. He now works as a volunteer at the Concorde Museum, and he shows people around. And the whole metaphor about engineering and control is a very strong metaphor. And also the whole thing about Concorde representing sort of love and tied to the ground now. So Concorde was the image we started with. The writer started with that image. She decided she wanted to write a piece about actually a family of engineers who've been engineers for 3 years. And North Bristol is full. It's amazing, I discover. North Bristol is absolutely chock full of families where generation after generation after generation have worked at Filton, either at Rolls-Royce or at BAE or at Airbus. I never knew this. It's extraordinary. And you get families where cousins and brothers and sisters, they all work there. They all work there. So we started from that. We started from engineering, Concorde, Airbus, Filton. And then we decided to make her a military engineer, just to kind of up the stakes. Now the reality is they don't make military planes at Airbus, but it's now a fiction, so we know it's a film. So, and in fact, of the 3 films, I would say ours is the only one that absolutely has to be set in Bristol, because Concorde was built in Bristol. The other 2, yeah, you're right. You could shoot them in Nottingham. Actually, probably, but there is something of the vibe. I mean, the 8 Minutes Idle is a kind of slightly slacker comedy set in a call centre, and there's something very Bristol about that world, that slightly slacker world, if you know what I mean. The other one, The Dark Half, is set on that boundary that Bristol has between the city and the country. And Bristol, I suspect there are other small cities that have this, but you can walk out of your door on the council estate in Hartcliffe and you go 50 yards and you're in countryside, and it's about the sort of tension between those. But you couldn't shoot that film in London.
You could shoot yours in Toulouse.
You could. We could, but we're very rude about the French, so you might not want to do that. Yeah, no, you could, or Seville, or so, yes, absolutely. But it's but no, Bristol is. No, I think that's fair enough.
But the 10 people in the panel didn't spot that, obviously.
No, they were happy. They were happy with the Bristol connection. Yeah. Any other questions?
You had to pick a panel of 10. That seems really excessive. Is that like standard?
No, but there were a lot of vested interests because each of the funders had to be there. So there was the BBC guy. There's a guy from BBC Films and a guy from BBC Acquisitions. There was iFeatures. There was the script editor who was going to work with us in iFeatures. There was somebody from the Bristol City Council, and then they brought in 3 sort of kind of outside eyes, people with no vested interest. So they got in a distributor. They get somebody from Pathé, because they wanted to basically test the marketability of the projects. I think that's fair enough. They had a freelance script editor as well, and a director, Julian Temple, sat on the first panel, because they wanted a kind of, and I think there was a writer there as well. So they wanted a writer, a director, a producer, and a distributor on a kind of on the panel. So it just kind of grew like that.
Are you doing a completion guarantee?
No, we're not. Basically, the thing is not bonded because it's an expense, and sort of iFeatures basically are doing that. I mean, the production accountant, the reporting procedures would be very, very tight. I think them just do it that way. Yeah.
Perhaps you could explain what a completion guarantee is, Alison. I believe a lot of people.
A completion guarantee, yes, I'm quite hazy about it myself actually. A completion guarantee is when it's like an insurance policy, basically, and you have to pay a large amount of money to someone, so that if things go tits up, as it were, then with your production, then somebody's going to pick up the tab. So it's like a kind of quite expensive insurance policy.
And they have the right. If you go over, you have to report. You have to report every day. You don't have to ring them up to say what time you turned over that morning for your first shot. If you go over budget, they can sack anybody or everybody, and they can bring their own people in to complete the film.
The soups own the film, basically.
Yeah.
If you mess up, it's quite scary, isn't it?
It is unbelievably scary. They're scarier than 10 people sitting in front of you.
And they come in their suits.
Yeah. Yes.
So would that be a decision you would make to bring that in, or iFeatures could have brought that?
No, they could. iFeatures could. No, that wouldn't be my decision. That was set up. That would have been set up by the financing package. And one of the brilliant things for me, I suppose, is that I've learned all about financing, but I've learned it in a protected environment. You know, so somebody else has done all the thinking. The legal paperwork on this is literally a pile of paper this high from the floor. And this is for a £300,000 film because it's so complex. I mean, we did a kind of drawing of it. You've basically got BBC and BBC and iFeatures put their money into a pot, and then that money is devolved down to 3 independent companies, what they call an SPV, a special purpose vehicle company, which each company makes one film. So mine is the Natalie named Cinema 6 SPV3 Limited. And then that company is owned by Matador, and they own it, but I'm a director of the company, and their money goes into there, and the way that's done, because they're going to claim 20% tax break on it. So they need to have a certain structure in order for the EIS structure to obey what the HMRC work needs, and they get their 20% back at the end. So
I was always told the producer spent more time on contracts and budgets than on script. Have you found that?
Not on contract, because iFeatures have done so much for us. But for instance, they have given us a production pack where we have, the £45,000 I mentioned, which was financing and legal. What that produced for us is what they call a production pack, and we have a template for every single contract we need, every single location, every single crew. Basically all the legal work has been done for us. So yeah, I have to sit and I have to type people's names in, but basically that's it. So that stuff has been done. Budgets, yeah, I spend a lot of time on budgets. But actually I like doing budgets. Budgets are really interesting because you make decisions about your film when you do your budget. When you take money away from the art department and put it into the camera department, you make an aesthetic decision. And I think that's quite interesting. I do find that quite interesting, and it changes all the time, you know. And once you get your line producer on board, you know, everybody's got their own interest. It's very interesting with budgets because you sit there, and Chris Moll comes in, and he's interested in making sure you're covered on things like insurance and accountancy, and the line producer is interested in whether you're covered, whether you've got enough money in there for your grip, and the petrol you're going to give everybody. And, you know, I'm interested in whether I've got enough money to pay the actor that I really, really want. And everybody's got their own agenda. And you kind of have to sit in the middle and balance that. And it's a bit like what I was saying with turning. There are certain costs you kind of can't drive down any further. You know, there's a point. You obviously aim to drive everything down as far as you can. You know, some people pay £18 a head for catering. You know, when you get it down to 12, you know you've done a good deal and it's not going to go any further. So once you've added up all those things, the amount you've got left to play with is tiny little slivers of money, to be honest. You know, what's actually left. Yeah.
I'm interested in what you as a producer would like to achieve for yourself through the film. I mean, you're not getting rewarded financially, but
no,
unless it's, you know, huge success, and fingers crossed for that.
What I'd like to get, well, you know, I'd like to get it seen. I'd like to get it sold. I'd like people to like it. I'd like to get nice reviews. I'd like to launch it at Toronto Film Festival, and I'd like people to come up afterwards and say, wow, you did that on 300,000, well done. That's what I want, basically. And I'd like to be able to make another one. I'd like to be able to sort of build enough of a reputation that the next time it's not so hard. And that the next time I can ask for £1 million, you know. And funnily enough, £1 million film is kind of the same as a £300,000 film, actually. You know, in terms of the scope and the ambition of it, it's just that you pay people less. Pay people more. You know, you pay a proper sort of Bec2 rate on £1 million film, and you pay a little bit more for your post-production. But probably the amount that you can do in reality, you can probably still only shoot for 4 or 5 weeks. You probably still can't do big effects and car crashes and any of that stuff. You're still talking about the same kind of film. It's just that it's slightly easier for the producer. You have to beg less, you know. It's just a little bit more relaxing because you can phone people up and say, will you do this job? And yes, I can pay you your rate. Whereas I found every phone call is an apology for, I'm sorry, I can't pay you your rate. The other key thing for me, and I haven't talked about this at all, and I should, the other key thing for me is my director. And it's been, she has been the key sell on this project. I'll tell you the story of how I met her. How much of time, Phil?
No, that's great. Let's hear about the director.
Okay.
Yeah.
Caroline's the writer, Caroline and I did this 4-page story outline. And we knew we needed a writer, and I had this kind of very strong instinct that this piece should not be a piece of British social realism. I didn't want to see another bloody piece of British social realism. So I wanted a European director. I made that decision really early. And I wanted a kind of European aesthetic. And I wouldn't call it art house because that's become a dirty word these days, but I wanted a European aesthetic. That's the nicest way of saying it. So I went to, this was round about June 2000, last year, before we submitted. I went to Encounters, because I'd done a bit of work with Encounters, and I went to them and I said, I'd like to see your whole back catalogue from 2008. So I went through the catalogue and I picked out anything that wasn't animation. I picked out basically all the live action films. I chucked out the American ones and the sort of Far Eastern ones because I figured I couldn't afford the airfares. And I basically looked at every single short that was screened in the festival that year. I sat there with DVDs hour after hour, looking at all the DVDs. And there's some really, really good films, and I kind of made a short list of directors that I thought were interesting. But there was nobody that really kind of shouted out for me, I have to be honest. So I kind of thought, I haven't got anyone yet. Time started ticking on, it got to October, we still hadn't got anyone on board. 2009 Encounters comes along, and I have a chat to the program coordinator, a guy called Rich Warren, who I knew quite well, and said, I'm looking for a female European director. Who is there? And he gave me a list of 3 or 4. I went to see their films, and I saw this film, Hanoi, Warsaw, which is a 28-minute film by a Polish director called Katarzyna Klimkiewicz. And I swear within the first 3 shots, within the first 30 seconds, I absolutely knew that I'd found her. I don't know why, I just had this very, very strong instinct. It's a brilliant short, an absolutely brilliant short, and it's been nominated for the European Film Award. She's there tonight. She finds out tonight whether she's actually won the European Film Award. And what is brilliant about it is it's visually very rich. It's a fantastic story, but her control of the narrative is wonderful. I mean, short films, it's very easy to make a pretty short film, but to make one where the narrative drive is strong is really hard, particularly over 28 minutes, because that's a long short. You know, that's really got to kind of deliver. As soon as I saw the film, I knew that I wanted her. She happened to be at the festival. The Polish Film Institute had paid for her to go to Encounters, so basically I met her in the bar and pitched to her. She liked it and came on board. That film, I burn copies of that film on my laptop 2 or 3 a day, and I make sure that every single HOD sees it first, every single agent sees it first, because what people buy into, they're not buying into money, what they buy into is talent. And people say, well, actually, I'm being paid a quarter of my rate, but I think this director is special, and I think she has something. The name of the film is Hanoi, Warsaw, and I always try and, when I'm sending out to actors, we haven't cast yet, we're still trying to get cast on board, I always try and emphasise that they should watch the DVD before they read the script. Because the script is one thing, but what she's going to do with it is another thing, and that's been a very important sell for me.
Alison, this has been fascinating. Thank you very much.
Oh, pleasure.
We've slightly run out of time, but I'm sure, I don't know if you can stick around for a minute or two longer.
Yeah. I'll be in the bar,
Have a coffee and people can ask any further questions. But thank you very much indeed
It's a
for
pleasure.